Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Gordon College Reading Clinic. Let's start by doing an overview of the class. First of all, I want to try to convince you that this will be the best year ever. This is going to be such a powerful time in your professional career as you embark on this really amazing training that will likely transform you as a teacher. It's going to be very demanding schedule-wise, of course, because you have a full-time job, you have a family and a life, and somehow you're going to jam in 100 one-on-one tutoring hours with all the paperwork that goes with it. But I promise you, there's no other way to become a reading specialist than to dive in deep with struggling readers and give them that one-on-one targeted intervention that they require. That is how you will develop expertise as a reading specialist, by having all of those hours logged with struggling students. And frankly, your work won't be done after this year. The more students you take on through your job or through private tutoring opportunities, the stronger you'll be at understanding struggling readers. Because the point of all this is to know that not all struggling readers struggle in the same way. If they did, we would just buy a program and hire humans to just carry it out, and that would be that. But that's not how it works with struggling readers. They're complicated and they vary in what they need. So you need to have that expertise. So this year is all about training your brain to understand and recognize different error patterns so you know how to respond. Most of us have crossed paths with each other in 640, the differentiation and remediation class. If you haven't met me yet, I'll give you a brief introduction. So I will be your instructor for the first 30 course hours. So I am the instructor of this course for the pre-tutoring training. So after that, you won't really see me again because Sarah and Liz will be taking over. So but you'll get to see me a lot now, a lot in the fall. So I went to Gordon for my bachelor's and my master's, so everything that you've experienced at Gordon with the reading specialty program, I have as well. So I feel you 100%. Been there, done that, I get it. I earned my doctorate at Northeastern University, and I actually forget the name of my dissertation now. Whoa, it's only been about a year or so, but how quickly my mind has moved on. So I am very interested in not only struggling readers, but I'm very interested in teachers. So I studied teachers, exemplar reading teachers, and that's what my dissertation was about. In fact, I followed a graduate from our program. A few years after she graduated, I tracked her down where she worked, and I did a case study about what makes her such an exemplar teacher, and I examined the factors that go into her work. So that has impacted me because as a trainer of reading specialists, I want to know what does it take for her to pull it off in the field, because it's a tough world out there, public schools. It's not an easy place to work. And when you're in the little bubble of grad school, you can be idealistic and have all these beautiful thoughts and dreams about what you want to do as a reading specialist. But when you get out into that world and you have poor leadership and students who don't have regular attendance and limited funding and staff members who don't share your opinions or understandings about the science of reading, I want to know how does a reading teacher pull it off? How do they still make it happen? So that's what I studied. And spoiler alert, one of the things that helped her be successful was her deep understanding of the reading brain and of struggling readers. So check, we'll be getting that in this course. I've been working at Gordon since 2010, and I love it here and I love this program. I'm very proud of the work we do as faculty and as grad students like you. So in terms of my other work experience, my experience as a teacher, I started out as a second and third grade classroom teacher, and I moved to work as a reading specialist. And then I left public schools in 2014 to, because of my girls were born, and then I kept up my work at Gordon and started private tutoring in the area where I lived. And in February of 2020, I opened a business, Cohasset Learning Studio, and then 6 weeks later, promptly closed down. And the pandemic actually really gave me some opportunities to grow big time. So now I have a pretty big in-person business and online business, and I'm always looking for more tutors. So when you graduate, come to me. Okay, so you know who I am, but what you really care about is what is the schedule? What have you gotten yourself into by signing up for this course? So I'm going to give you the big picture. If you haven't already figured it out from all my emails all spring about what's happening, let me give you the big picture. We have a chunk of training that's happening right now. That's your pre-tutoring hours. That's led by me. Then the tutoring launches in the middle of October. And that's when I say goodbye and Sarah and Liz swoop in and take over, and they sprinkle in seminars throughout the year. So the seminars are pretty heavy. They meet every other week, October, November through the beginning of December. And then we take a break for Christmas break. And then we have some more seminars sprinkled in January, February, and that's about it. And then it peters off and you're not on your own. You're still being observed, but the demand for seminars decreases by that point. So you've got the pre-tutoring hours, and then you basically have sort of like every other week from October-ish to February. And all of it is online. So you're not coming to Gordon College for this course. Your seminars are all meeting online. Those seminars, once you start tutoring, those seminars are really to support you. So I am zooming in on actually how to plan, design, and carry out lessons. That's what I'm talking about. Sarah and Liz will fine-tune how to do your lessons. They'll cover some advanced topics that we don't get to now in the early fall and in the summer. But a lot of it will be the troubleshooting. You coming to seminars with questions, you collaborating with your peers. That's when a lot of the really good learning happens, because we're not just talking in the abstract. How do you teach a vowel, consonant, and syllable? No, at that point, we're talking about your particular students. And so the conversations move to be much more personal and specific in those seminars throughout the second half of the year. Then we have one little seminar all by itself in May to wrap things up for the year, and to just discuss all the things that you need to do to close out and complete your portfolio. Choosing students, that's a big topic that you all want to know about. I got lots of emails about that. We're going to talk about the details of this once we are together on Zoom, because this is going to have a lot of specific questions. But here's the big picture. For the reading clinic, we want struggling students in grades 1 through 4. We want students who are struggling with decoding and fluency. You are learning the Orton-Gillingham method. So, although there are lots of children that would benefit from using OG at higher levels or a modified level down for kindergarten and pre-K, we are not selecting them for this purpose, because you are being trained. So we want you to have a first, second, third, or fourth grader in that zone struggling with phonics, spelling, fluency. That is what we need for training purposes. When I accept Orton-Gillingham students in my private practice, or when I'm taking on new clients, I apply Orton-Gillingham principles to 4- and 5-year-olds. I apply it to 5th grade and older. I'm not telling you that OG is only for grades 1 through 4, but because we're focusing on the earliest parts of the scope and sequence, levels 1 and 2 out of 5 levels, it's likely that a child in those grades would be a struggling student in those grades would be a good match. That's not 100% the case. We've had up to 6th graders be involved in our clinic before, because they were working really down low at level 1 and 2. So we'll sort out the details, on our Zoom or one-on-one or whatever. In the past, we used to assign all of the students to our tutors. So we took the burden of finding students. And that's because we all work together at one location. Because our reading clinic has now changed and we're working spread out, at our own locations, we are figuring out what works best. We already have a roster of kids signed up and who are eligible, so we can assign those students to you. But we also know that you probably have struggling readers in mind, and you probably would prefer to have at least one of your students be an in-person client that you can work with right next to you. So let's sort out those details over Zoom in person. Okay, let's talk about the assignments for the course. So every week well, not every week, often there are readings. The readings come from the Birch book, the Moats book, and the Wharton Gillingham manual. And then occasionally when we get to the seminars with Liz and Sarah, they also send some articles or post some articles. So readings. There are also videos and lectures, and so it might be a video link to something on the internet, or it could be a recorded lecture by one of us and you have the link to watch it. Those readings, the videos, the lectures, all of that should be finished before your seminar meeting. That's meant to be done before the seminar meeting. There are also quizzes that will happen online. You'll get directions about how to complete those. And discussion board prompts. So the discussion board doesn't have its own grade because that's included in class participation. So when this class used to meet in person, we didn't have those discussion board prompts because we were meeting together and those conversations were happening live, in the moment. Now we're limiting our time, our face-to-face time, our synchronous learning time on Zoom because we can only spend so much time plugged into Zoom before it gets miserable. So our Zoom classes are only going to be 2 hours, and so some of that discussion is getting pushed online to the discussion board. So we expect you to write thoughtful answers because this is your opportunity to be heard by us and your peers. And then there's also a requirement to, within a couple of days, respond to your classmates so that it does have somewhat of a conversation piece. It doesn't replace real conversation. We still will have Zoom to do a little bit of that, but it is a way just to make sure that everybody's engaging with the content from the readings and the lectures. And some people will enjoy it because some people do not like speaking over Zoom or in front of the whole class, and they're more comfortable having a moment to collect their thoughts and put them on the discussion board. Practice lessons. Most of the practice lessons you write will be during this pre-tutoring stage with me, and then there'll be a couple that you do later with Sarah and Liz. The purpose of practice lessons is just for you to go through the motions of filling out a template in a very controlled and targeted way. It's a little awkward to write a Wharton Gillingham lesson for a make-believe student because the whole point of Wharton Gillingham is that it's targeted to the student's specific needs. So if we don't have a student that we're writing for, that kind of undermines the whole purpose of writing the lesson, right? Because it's all supposed to be, targeted to that child. So I'm going to have this sort of imaginary child that we're all going to write for. And these will just be homework assignments in these first couple months while we're preparing for tutoring. There's also going to be a group project that I'll let Sarah and Liz talk about. And the most important thing, of course, is your 100 tutoring hours. That is the whole point of all this. So most of your grade is based on how you perform as a tutor, because that's what this whole thing is about. Most people do quite well with participation because you can't really get through this class without not speaking up. Like I said, your participation grade comes from your involvement on the discussion board, your involvement on these live Zoom calls, and of course the way you interact with your observer when you have a lesson observation. So the way you ask questions and the way that you respond thoughtfully to others is what it's all about. And of course, most people, this isn't something we have to consider. It's check, they did it, excellent. They've been with us all year engaging. Other people engaging this way is a challenge, so we put this here as a reminder to you that this is something that's expected of you. When you become a reading specialist, part of your job is being a collaborator with other professionals and with parents. So communication is an important part of your job. All right, I know nobody likes to see quizzes on the agenda, but part of being accredited by the International Dyslexia Association, the IDA, receiving that honor, means that we do need to include some objective assessments in our coursework. Personally, I like using your teaching as a way to grade you because that's the whole point of all of this. Yet I value the role that quizzes and tests play in our course as well. By having quizzes, that sends a message to you that content knowledge is very important. And by having you take the quizzes and see your grades, it points out to you, oh, this is an area of weakness for me, or, oh, good, I got this. So we want to make sure that you have deep understanding of the English language, deep understanding of the reading brain. And to do that, we push you to take these quizzes. It holds you accountable, and it will also, I mean, be a nod. I'm not telling you it directly prepares you for the MTEL, but it's a nod in that direction, because at some point here, you're going to have to take a reading specialist test to prove your content knowledge and your understanding of struggling readers. Nobody has ever failed this class because of their quiz grade, so don't worry. This is just a little kick in the pants for you. As I gave you, I told you in the overview, we do have practice lessons spread out through the class. There's 10 practice lessons that you're going to write, and you're going to get the first 6 are going to be with me, I believe. So the due dates for those are in your syllabus, and when we're in class, I'm going to give you very specific information about which parts of the lesson plan template you fill out for a practice lesson, because we're not doing it in its entirety. Okay, we're going to stay tuned about this group project. The purpose of this is to get you to think deep and collaborate with some classmates, because everybody in this class has such amazing knowledge and brings interesting strengths to the table in terms of what they know and what they're an expert at. And we want you to have a chance to learn from one another. So this group project takes place early in the fall. Eventually the assignments really teeter off the second half of the year, and the focus is really just on you and your tutoring at that point, because that's going to take a lot of time for sure. So during the part of the course written by Sarah and Liz, you'll write 3 written reflections, and you can see the topics listed there. So the first 2 have to do with your own student or students. You can write on one or both of your students. And these are things that we want you to be thinking through anyway, so we're just kind of forcing you to put it to paper or to type it so that your brain goes through the steps of really thinking about what it is that you're noticing about your student and what kinds of errors you're seeing. This is us helping to shape your brain as a reading specialist and get you to engage in this kind of thinking. Every time we are presented with a new child for our roster or caseload, we not only are we doing the assessments and having that data, and test scores, but we want to be observing what we see, what stands out about them. Likewise, as we get to know them, we'll start to pick up on more error patterns. These might have shown up in the original testing or might not have, but finding these error patterns that's one of the most essential activities that you can do as a reading specialist, as an Orton Gillingham tutor, being aware of error patterns. Because if you don't even know what they're doing wrong, you can't properly remediate or plan structured intervention or strategic intervention. And I don't just mean like how many words they got right, wrong. That's not a pattern, that's a score. I mean looking for what kinds of errors they're making. So we'll talk about this more, but that's the kind of thinking we're aiming for. And then you'll also have an opportunity to observe a peer in this class at least once. And that's a great chance for you to see another tutor doing her thing and another kind of struggling reader. So you'll probably learn from both of them, the reader and the teacher, as you see how they work together. So of course, the point of all that we're doing here is the tutoring. That's the most important thing you're here to do. And with that comes 10 observations. So we're meeting on Zoom. We used to do this in person, of course, and then we added a Zoom element because some of our observers didn't live close by. And now this year, we're looking at 100% Zoom observations. So more details about the scheduling of that later. Let's just talk about what happens in an observation. So in an observation lesson, what you need to give your observer, the supervisor, a copy of the lesson plan. So that can just happen over email, because they need to see what you're planning and then what it looks like when you're carrying it out. The other thing the observer needs is the child's record binder. So if this was, the olden days, 2019 and earlier, we would have actually had a binder on the table with all the lessons that you've taught so far, and they would have had notes written all over them. You would have had the spelling pages that the children completed so we could see that. This would help the tutors see what you've been doing in the past, what it's been looking like, and what where the child is, on the continuum at this point. That provides the context for the observer. So now we're going to have that digitally. So we'll talk specifics later, but what I imagine that to look like is a Google Drive folder that you set up that has all your lessons in it. And so somebody who's observing you could click through and look at all of that and see everything you've been working on. So feedback will be given immediately after the observation. So if the observation is happening live on Zoom, that means that you and the observer linger afterwards and discuss the lesson. That would be the ideal situation because you'd be getting your feedback right away. Another option is for you to record yourself teaching and email that recording to the observer, who will then type up the feedback and give it to you. So once the schedule is set, we'll know exactly how it's going, but ideally we'd be having, you'd be on Zoom and they'd be watching you do your lesson that way. If you are doing poorly and struggling and you have, some people have a rough start or whatever, but some people it's more than a rough start. They have a couple lessons that just show that they're just really not getting it. If that's the case, we'll probably be observing you more than 10 times because we don't want you to fail this course because you had a really hard start. So we want your grade to get the Orton-Gillingham certificate at the end. Your average for your 10 lessons needs to be an 85% or more. If you have a couple of really bad lessons and you do very poorly and that brings down your grade, we don't want that to happen. So we would just schedule 11, 12 observations because we want you to prove yourself and show growth. That has happened about twice in the 10 years that I've been doing this. So don't think that that's a likely scenario. Likely you're going to do excellent and be observed 10 times, and that will be that. So don't stress. But just so you know, this is the most important part of this whole course, is you actually being able to do OG. And if you can't do OG, we're going to surround you with attention and support to make sure that you can do it, because we know you're here to get that certificate. At the end of the course in June, you're going to be writing a progress report for each of the children that you tutor. This is more professional than those other observations, those reflections that you would have written earlier in the course. Those reflections are more journal-like, whereas the progress report should mimic a kind of professional document that you might pass in school to a colleague, or that you might type up and give to a parent. And in fact, you will pass it to the parents. And so it needs to have that professional academic language. All right, I've got more tests to tell you about. So the final exam from the reading clinic that we give you is similar to the quizzes that you've had throughout the year. So it's just our little kick in the pants push to insist that you are an expert with content knowledge and understanding the reading brain, and you can be able to answer questions and write about that in an objective way. By this point, you would have already done amazing work as an OG tutor all year and be well on your way to earning certification, but we just have that little final exam at the end too. Sarah and Liz will cover that, so they'll tell you more about it. Also, because our program is accredited by the International Dyslexia Association, very few programs in the country are, so this is a huge deal, huge honor. Linked with that accreditation now, starting in 2020, is this other exam that you have to take, similar to the MTAL, that kind of a thing. But the good thing is that with this exam, you're going to be stamped as a structured literacy dyslexia interventionist. So there's going to be a certain title that goes with it. So not only will you have your master's degree, in reading specialty. Not only will you have your be certified in Orton Gillingham, but you'll also have this national stamp on you as an educator for what you are. So great for the resume, great for if you wanted to move into the private tutoring world. This is a way to show your expertise. So CERI is the Center for Effective Reading Instruction, and they are affiliated with IDA. And I mean, I love it because I love what they do, but they're also just here to take your money, make you take another test so that you can get a stamp. So that part I realize is a little bit discouraging for you, another test and more fees that go with it. But this is the best of the best. This isn't some random accreditation. In the world that we're in, reading specialists, this is the best of the best. So good for you. And the good news is Sarah, Liz, and I have to take it as well. So you are not alone. We can give you the scoop on what it is all about. All right, let's talk about the portfolio. So again, connected with IDA, part of our accreditation with them is that our grad students have a portfolio at the end of their time together. Most of this portfolio is just the stuff that you're already doing in our class. So this is not an extra assignment. There's no grade for it because everything in your portfolio is something you've already done. So it's a collection of the ungraded and graded work that you did throughout the year. And oh, it says see attached. That's because I copied it right from the syllabus. In your syllabus, it tells you more about those portfolio requirements. This is just an administrative to do for you at the end. It is not a new assignment. So that is good. And here is my last image for you here. It's supposed to be an inspirational photo so that you feel empowered to take on this year with enthusiasm. Now, as I'm recording this, it's 2020, so I realize that this particular year has all sorts of challenges and unknowns attached to it. We feel you. Sarah, Liz, and I are mothers. We are teachers, so we are in this with you, okay? We get all the insecurities that are happening right now. In fact, in a typical school year, we have a lot going on as parents and as teachers. There's a lot to balance, and this course is hard in a typical school year. And especially in 2020, we realize how sensitive one little change in one spot of your life trickles down to a whole schedule change that affects other things. So we get it. We're going to get through this. We have some flexibility by doing this online now. That means the schedule is less tight than it was before because now you have a little bit more freedom to do things when it suits your schedule. You know what I mean? So that's a huge help this year. And lastly, you will be so pleased with yourself. The kind of thinking and the shift that will happen in your brain as an educator will be worth it. It will be satisfying. You might not choose to go to be a reading specialist or an Orton Gillingham tutor after this. You might love your work in the classroom, and that's amazing. We need people in the classroom who have the brain of a reading specialist and an OG tutor. We need you in the classroom. We also need you doing all that specialized work as a reading specialist in school, supporting teachers, running those intervention groups, and we need you working privately. We need people who can do this job without the constraints of public school and can coach and guide and support families and be that cheerleader and that miracle worker for kids at home as well. So whatever you choose to do with your knowledge and expertise, great, because there's so much room for you in this field. There is such a need for people like you who have this depth of knowledge. So yay, we're gonna do it.